Alright folks, you won't believe this, but what I'm about to tell you isn't some crazy movie plot. This is real. It happened right here, in my neighborhood. My HOA, bless their hearts, managed to turn their fancy $1 million clubhouse into a giant pond overnight. All because they thought they were smart, trying to save a buck, and ended up blowing up their own system. This story's got everything: drama, twists, and a satisfying dose of justice. You're listening to HOA Outlaws, and I'm Jack Reed. I've lived on my 20-acre ranch for the past 15 years. It's simple: farmhouse, barns, space. My place borders Willowbrook Heights, one of those perfectly manicured, upscale places. I'm a retired civil engineer specialized in water systems, and I picked this spot for peace and quiet. What I didn't plan for was becoming the target of Beatrix Sterling, the HOA president from hell. Sterling took over about 3 years ago. Word was she'd been booted from another neighborhood for financial shady business. Mid-50s, always dressed for a power lunch, talking down to everyone. She was obsessed with community improvement, which really meant building her own little empire and making everyone kowtow. My ranch, being right next to her precious community, became her next project. It all kicked off one Tuesday morning in March. I was having coffee with Buster, my German Shepherd, when I spotted a crew near my property line with surveying gear. They acted like they owned the place. I walked over and met Sterling. She looked at me like I was dirt. "Mr. Reed, I presume," she said, dripping fake sweetness. "Beatrix Sterling, Willowbrook Heights HOA president. We're surveying for our new water conservation project." I asked about it and she dropped the bomb. They were installing an automated irrigation system and planned to dig their own well to save costs. Right there along my property line. My stomach churned. As a water engineer, I knew the risks of unauthorized drilling in this area. I politely asked about permits and soil surveys. Sterling's face hardened. "Mr. Reed, this is HOA business. We don't need your input." They left, but I went inside and dug out old documents. My property used to be part of a large farm. Hidden beneath my land was a main water line, decommissioned on paper, but still a critical backup for the entire area. Sterling's chosen spot? Right on top of it. The next morning, survey stakes were all along the property line, some clearly on my side. I documented everything: photos, measurements. I called Sterling's office, leaving a polite message about the boundary issue. She never called back. 2 days later, I got a certified letter on HOA letterhead, bureaucratic speak for, "You're obstructing us. We'll do what we want." That evening, looking at the old infrastructure map, the irony hit me. She'd picked the absolute worst spot for her community. I called my old friend John at the municipal water department. "John," I said, "check the pressure readings for Sector 7. We might have a problem." I had a plan forming. 3 days after my call to John, I got news. Sterling had somehow gotten a temporary drilling permit by claiming to be a homeowner named Robert Johnson at my address. Fraudulent, but official enough to deter inspectors for 30 days. This sent me digging. I found Sterling had secretly passed a regulation letting her approve projects under $50,000 without a full board vote, buried in a document about holiday decorations. More importantly, my neighbor George, a retired plumber, told me Sterling had a personal vendetta. 2 years ago, I challenged her plan to rezone my property for a parking lot at a community meeting, making her look bad. She never forgot. The next morning, heavy machinery woke me. A drilling rig was setting up near my line. I went over. Sterling was there, directing like a general. "Mr. Reed," she smirked. "Hope the noise isn't bothering you." I asked if they checked for utilities. "Of course," she snapped, defensive when I asked to see flags. The crew looked nervous. One tried to raise a concern with Sterling, but she waved him off. Later, I learned they'd hit something hard at 15 feet and met unusual resistance. Sterling ordered them to keep going. That evening, George gave me a note. "Old water mains still active. I fixed a leak in it last year." This wasn't just incompetence. Sterling knew. Was this sabotage? The drilling continued. My water pressure spiked overnight, a clear sign the main was being compromised. I called John, but he said Sterling filed a harassment complaint against me, cutting off my access to official help. She'd outmaneuvered me again. That afternoon, She brought in lawyers and a private investigator who openly photographed my property, even my excavator, to intimidate me. Mrs. Sterling is prepared to take this as far as necessary, the attorney warned. They were clearly interested in my equipment. I watched the crew through binoculars. They pulled up concrete and rebar. The supervisor was agitated, called Sterling, argued with her, pointing at the hole. She fired him. A younger, less experienced crew arrived the next day. George called. Jack, people are starting to panic. Water pressure is 0 in half the houses. Some have brown water. Sterling's blaming the city, but she's hitting that main. She was using the problem she created to justify the project causing it. A master manipulator. Later that afternoon, the new crew found something wet and muddy deep in the hole. The worker showed Sterling pointing down, making cutting motions. Sterling snatched the sample, threw it away, and ordered them to keep drilling. A truck arrived with sealant. They were going to patch it and keep going. I made a decision. I drove to a hill half a mile away, set up my camera equipment, and started documenting everything. Leaking samples, repairs, ground saturation. The main line was failing, and she knew. I had to record it. George texted, "Emergency at the drilling site. They hit something big and water is shooting up about 10 feet. Sterling is screaming at the crew to keep going anyway. This is it, Jack. It's happening tonight." Saturday night, around 11:30, I heard it, a deep rumbling crack, then a roar. The main line ruptured. A massive column of water erupted from the drilling site, maybe 30 feet high. It flowed directly towards the clubhouse. This wasn't a leak. It was a catastrophic failure. The volume of water was immense. Sterling was there, in her nightgown and rain boots, screaming, pointing towards me, blaming me. Even from the hill, I could hear her trying to control the narrative, accusing me to arriving emergency responders. The area swarmed with fire, police, ambulances, water crews. Shutting off the water was complex. It would cut service to hundreds of homes. Here's the real twist. The next morning, the city's investigation team arrived. The drilling site wasn't just over the water main, it was also over a major $20 million fiber optic cable installation project that Sterling had deliberately sabotaged for months through bureaucratic obstruction and misinformation. Her motive? Her brother-in-law owned a competing company that lost the bid. The well project was a cover to damage the fiber optic line and force a rebid. Sterling was willing to destroy her own community's water and clubhouse for personal profit and revenge. In the chaos, a reporter from the regional newspaper called. "Mr. Reed," she said, "Sterling's blaming you, but we've found evidence suggesting otherwise. Would you comment?" Looking at Sterling still arguing in the mud and the USB drive in my hand containing all my evidence, the fraudulent permits, trespassing video, financial analysis, secret recordings, I knew it was time. "Yes," I said. "I have a lot to say and evidence to back it up." As I prepared to meet the reporter, George called, terrified. "Jack, you need to get down here. Sterling just arrived with city council members and lawyers. She's telling them you sabotaged the equipment and caused the rupture intentionally. She's got evidence, Jack. She's claiming you'll be arrested for terror." The emergency meeting Sterling called for Monday evening was her final act of control. She spun a narrative. I was an unstable domestic terrorist who sabotaged their infrastructure out of spite, using my engineering background. She filled the backup meeting room. Clubhouse was a swimming pool with people, reporters, city council, even federal investigators. She had photos, diagrams, testimony from the PI, and a fake timeline painting me as increasingly unhinged. She even claimed I was part of a conspiracy with telecom companies to block the fiber optic project, using my excavator to pre-weaken the main. As she reached her climax, demanding my arrest for federal terrorism, every phone in the room buzzed. My attorney had sent the email, The Truth About Beatrice Sterling's Corruption and Fraud. It contained everything. HD video of trespassing with GPS/timestamps, copies of her fraudulent permits using my name, HOA documents proving illegal rule changes, detailed financial analysis showing suspicious payments, and recorded phone calls of Sterling discussing her schemes provided by a former board member. The room went silent as people read. Expressions of shock, disgust, and anger replaced rapt attention. They held up phones showing her the evidence. George was the first to speak, loudly. "Mrs. Sterling explained filing permits using Jack Reed's name without consent?" Sterling stopped, her face a mask of terror. This is fake, she shrieked, fabricated evidence. Character assassination. But nobody listened. The evidence was overwhelming. Reporters scribbled notes, council members huddled, federal investigators studied their screens. Sterling tried to regain control, but people shouted questions. How could she use his identity? Why block fiber optic? What about those contracts? She had no answers. Finally, she stormed out. At the doorway, she turned back, eyes wild. Pointing at a camera, she screamed, "I won't let it end like this. Jack Reed, you picked the wrong enemy." Then, a final threat, loud enough for everyone. Ask Jack Reed about the environmental contamination on his property. Ask him about the toxic waste he's hiding. He knew we'd discover his dirty secret. Oh God, what secret did she think I had? Sterling's plan B was a federal lawsuit, environmental terrorism, ecocide, endangering public health. Using falsified soil samples and reports from her brother-in-law's front company, she claimed I was storing toxic waste and sabotaged the drilling to hide it. It was a desperate, rushed media blitz. At the preliminary hearing, Sterling's sophisticated legal team presented their case, making me look like a dangerous environmental criminal. I felt a stab of fear. They were good. The judge seemed convinced. Then the doors opened. Dr. Sarah Chin, a senior EPA environmental engineer, walked in. My attorney called her as a witness. Dr. Chin revealed the EPA had been secretly investigating Sterling for 6 months for environmental fraud and illegal waste disposal linked to her HOA schemes. Sterling had been running a sophisticated operation using fake reports to extort money and systematically targeting opponents. The soil samples from my property were deliberately contaminated fakes from her brother-in-law's firm. My property was actually clean. The true shocker, Sterling had been deliberately contaminating water supplies in communities she operated in, creating health crises to justify expensive infrastructure projects for her associates. The fiber optic project had monitoring equipment that would have exposed her water scheme. The courtroom was silent as Dr. Chin dismantled Sterling's case. Sterling stared in terror. Then, her final, desperate mistake. She jumped up screaming, "No, I won't let it end. I know your secret. That ranch isn't all you have. Something else you're hiding, money laundering. Offshore accounts." Panic flashed through me. Some consulting payments were large but totally legal. But in this climate. Then I realized she was bluffing. If she had anything real, she'd have used it earlier. The judge silenced her. My attorney presented my perfectly clean financial records, proving her accusations baseless and exposing her desperation. The rest was formality. The evidence against Sterling was overwhelming. The judge expanded the federal investigation. Sterling was hit with a permanent injunction. As she walked out, federal agents arrested her. Mail fraud, wire fraud, environmental terrorism, extortion, money laundering, racketeering, the charges were extensive. Her face as she was handcuffed was priceless. She went from HOA president to federal criminal facing decades. The aftermath was swift. The HOA dissolved the corrupt board, held new elections, and hired forensic accountants to recover stolen funds. They used the money to repair the clubhouse and fund real improvements. I got a formal apology and a substantial settlement covering costs and damages enough to fund water projects in rural communities. Victims in other states came forward, filing class actions. Congress passed the Sterling Act for HOA transparency and oversight. Months later, sitting on my porch, I saw a little girl and her mother by the rebuilt clubhouse. A small memorial garden had a plaque. In memory of lessons learned from greed and corruption, may we always remember that true community strength comes from honesty, transparency, and respect for our neighbors. The mother explained it meant bad people sometimes do bad things for money, but good people working together ensure justice. The little girl asked about the bad lady. She went to prison, the mother said. And the good man who stopped her is living peacefully on his ranch, helping other communities. As Sterling was led away, she turned back, spitting hatred. You think you've won? They'll investigate your background. Things you've hidden. It will destroy you. A final, empty threat. My background was clean, vetted by federal agents. Her last gasp. After the sentencing, a reporter mentioned Sterling's network was larger, planning to target other communities nationally. Would I help? This story might not be over. Sterling's web was vast, and other victims might need help. Thanks for listening to QA Stories. Like this if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more wild tales. Let me know if you want to hear about investigating Sterling's connections across the country.